Hey, it's Will Erickson at Momentum Group Tech. I want to speak about reducing tech debt through using Bubble. If you're not familiar with tech debt, technical debt is where you build out systems in IT, like an application, and then over time you make decisions which later on you need to spend more time reversing in order to move forward again. In the worst cases, tech debt can mean that you basically have to start from scratch and start rebuilding your work with a really firm foundation. So considering how to reduce this is a really great thought process. And it's also just important to understand how a platform can actually help you to reduce this just through the way it operates. So sometimes we get asked, does Bubble lead to technical debt? Um, people are sort of on the hunt to find reasons why we shouldn't be using Bubble, which is fair enough. But I'd actually like to ask the question, does Bubble actually reduce tech debt? So things like, will I introduce risk into my business or my organization going with Bubble? What are the maintenance issues I'm likely to encounter? And how does Bubble compare to other platforms, other no-code or low-code platforms? So to start with, just want to understand what Bubble is. It's a hosted web application builder. So it's a web application builder, but it's hosted. It's hosted by Bubble, the company. Therefore, it's also a hosting provider. So they provide you with the different elements of cloud hosting that you need to run your application. On top of that, it's its own proprietary visual programming language. So the team at Bubble have created this language and developed it over many years, and it provides us with a lot of features that are proprietary to Bubble. So we don't access the source code, we just use this language on the hosting that they provide. Importantly, you can see that this is a vertically integrated stack. So it means that your hardware and your software are running in the same place. Unlike other solutions that are more in the open source world, say like WordPress, where you go and find hosting and you install it, Bubble is managed on the same stack. And that does provide a good benefit in some ways. Now, I know some people don't like things that are vertically integrated. There's lots of people out there that don't like things like Apple for this reason. But interestingly, Apple is known for its reliability, despite its increased cost, and also for its user experience. And I think in this, this is an example of how integrating your hardware and your software can actually lead to improved performance, particularly when you consider what Bubble does as a platform for developers like me. So why would that be a good thing? Well, let's start with some of the pros, some of the reasons why Bubble will actually help reduce your technical debt in your projects. So Bubble abstracts away a lot of things. This means that we don't need to think about it as a developer on the Bubble platform. We don't need to worry about configuring our cloud environment. So we don't go to AWS or Azure, Google Cloud, and have to configure this for ourselves. This is all done for us. That's a huge step. I had a client once that did a backend on Ruby, and they hosted it on AWS, and then we connected to a Bubble, and they spent thousands of dollars just getting that developer to help set all of that up and get all the variables in the environment set correctly and all the API connections and things working. So don't underestimate the cost of just simply configuring a cloud environment. Management of the database, APIs, version control, live and test environments. Again, this is huge, right? You can set these things up, but it takes time and it takes knowledge, and small mistakes can mean that you don't move forward. So, you really need to work with people that know how to do these things. Again, that's not cheap. And then I've heard about founders starting apps without having a test or live environment. So people that run one system and then they have to push changes, and then it's hard to keep those live users happy when you're actively making changes in your live environment. So even that small thing that Bubble offers straight away is a huge win. Setup of the database of APIs. So you get a whole bunch of API options straight out of the box, like the data API, and also the ability to easily create API workflows. And then their version control systems. So again, most developers will be connecting into Git and hosting their code somewhere. Well, Bubble takes care of that. So you can, save versions, roll them back, deploy to live and all that sort of thing. And that's part of how it just works. You don't need to think about that. Again, the third point there is linking your front end and your back end securely. So if you do have a different back end, then you need to think about how do you actually maintain that security? How do you integrate the roles and all that sort of thing? So Bubbles, when you use Bubble out of the box, so using its own database and using its front end, it's got a very, very tight integration, and that's secure. So as long as you know how to use the product, you can secure it, that you can configure that very securely. And privacy rules in that context are a really awesome tool that help manage user roles or manage access to separate accounts within one major database, so you can set up a multi-tenanted environment. So that is a very big win through using Bubble. Bubble abstracts away programming in traditional languages. So JavaScript. So all these languages that you might hear about on the web, they take a long time to learn, and they also take quite a long time to build stuff. So you don't really need to worry about any of those things. You just get to basically drag and drop and create database objects and create workflows and hook it all up. And you very rarely need to come into contact with any of these languages, which is a big time saver. Especially if you've done these languages, you realize, one misplaced character as you're learning can cost you half a day as you try and debug it. Deciding on which web framework to use. So again, not only do you need to know a language, but you need to also have a web framework in most cases. And these are a few examples, but these things change over time. You need to keep your code updated, and then every few years, it's quite common that people actually want to change and switch to the newest, trendiest thing that's rising up in popularity. So this can take a lot of time, and rebuilding your application and worrying about frameworks is a huge toll. If you go and Google these frameworks and read what developers are saying, often there's a huge whinge about the level of maintenance headaches that these things create. I've even had clients who have built on Microsoft Stack, and they've said, 5-6 years on, they got quoted to rebuild web applications, or they priced up rebuilding things they'd built 5-6 years ago to get it to the most recent framework, and they would have to spend the same cost again to basically rebuild that app on the new frameworks. So we can't underestimate the cost of this sort of work. And then the last point is just updating your code as you update your framework. So as a Bubble developer, we get to focus on building out user-facing functionality rather than building all this traditional backend dev stuff. What that means is that we can have a much bigger impact as a smaller team. So we abstract away a whole bunch of headaches. And, of course, in any development project, the main cost is not the hosting cost. The main cost is the time of the development team to build it. So by switching to a platform like Bubble, you really have a potentially huge saving on the main cost of your project. So what are the areas that you still need to be mindful of not introducing tech debt? Well, like anything, Bubble still requires planning. So you need to organize your logic well. You need to be planned and have a plan for how to structure things that in a way that will scale. And this is the same across design, across style, across data, across workflow. If anyone is looking to go and build something on Bubble, or you're looking to engage a contractor to do it, then you need to think, am I going to work with someone who can build this for the duration of the time I'm going to use this product? If you want to just build something throwaway and test out an idea in a couple of months and then, potentially start again, cool, go and find someone really, really cheap and you'll probably get what you need. But if you're planning to use your app for 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, then you really need to find someone who knows how to organize this logic properly and who can build something that can then be built upon. Another potential con is the lock-in to Bubble as a platform. And so like all proprietary systems that are vertically integrated, there is lock-in. People don't like Apple for that reason. However, I would argue that, again, the thing that we're saving with Bubble is time, and time is money. That's your largest cost. So moving to a platform like Bubble means that, I guess, the cost of the lock-in is relatively low compared to the cost of the amount of saving that you'll have in terms of development time. Thirdly, you do have less control over aspects of your infrastructure. So whenever we trade off, it's great saving from a business perspective for some simplicity and some things to be abstracted and taken away from us, then yeah, of course, we have less control over our infrastructure. And this can be a problem. I've had this as a problem if you've got particular sensitive data that might need to be hosted in a particular country, or if you need to use different parts of, there might be something in Bubble Stack that doesn't work. Like say we had talking to some people in China, and some of the elements of their stack are slowed down by the Great Firewall, and so it would have been more practical to have other things we could sub in, but we just can't do that on Bubble as it stands right now. There's also, a bit less control over when you upgrade sort of the core code base of Bubble for your app. So Bubble does roll out versions, and you can sort of control when you apply those, but it can be, you basically just have to upgrade to the next version and check everything is still working. I haven't had any major problems with that, but it's potentially an issue. And finally, the version control systems that Bubble have are quite lightweight, and in a multi-developer team, it can be hard sometimes to work in that environment. Although there is talk of improvements being actively in the pipeline this year, 2023. So I just want to say that although these things might sound like red flags, they're certainly not problems that are unique to Bubble. They're common to all software, particularly proprietary software solutions, which many enterprises use and rely on. Once you get into these tools, you commit large resources to developing your business logic and your particular user experiences on that tool, then you are effectively stuck there unless you want to pay the cost of then going and doing that in another platform. So that is not an unusual problem, but at the same time, you've got to weigh that up against the benefits. So ultimately, it comes down to choosing the right tool for the job. If you have a use case that is suitable for Bubble, and then you can expect to experience development. And I just like to say 20 to 40% of the time as traditional programming. The difference there just relates onto what you're doing within Bubble, whether you're using a lot of its features or you're doing a bit more custom work. Also, the size of the project. As the project grows, and I'm talking very large projects, it can slow down a little bit. But yeah, in the majority of use cases for building web applications, Bubble is actually a huge cost and time saver. Bubble will abstract away a lot of the problems that cost traditional software makers a significant amount of time and money. But yeah, you just need to have a good understanding of the platform to fully leverage its benefits, especially as you scale. So that's where, we have done sort of over 35 different projects. I think we've had almost 50,000 hours of time as a company using Bubble and working in a team. So we've developed an academy course which has some more information about some of this stuff. So if you'd like to learn more, certainly check out momentumgroup.tech/academy, and I look forward to meeting you. Thanks.